I never thought grief could be so sharp, so cruelly ironic. My 17-year-old daughter, Lily, spent 3 full days cooking for my mother's wake, pouring every ounce of love she had into pies, casseroles, roasted chicken, every dish a small tribute to the woman who had shaped both of our lives. And then, just an hour before the first guest was supposed to arrive, my phone buzzed. It was my dad, Richard. "We'll just stop by the cemetery." "The house gathering isn't necessary," he wrote, as if 3 days of effort, hours of sweat and tears, and a house filled with the smell of my mother's favorite foods meant nothing at all. I stared at that message, my hands shaking slightly, but I didn't respond. I didn't cry. And I didn't argue. I did something else instead, something that would set the stage for the most unexpected night of my life. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You have to understand how much work Lily put into this. On the first day, she mapped out every recipe with the precision of a chef and the devotion of a granddaughter trying to honor the woman who baked her first birthday cake. On the second day, she cooked nonstop, tasting sauces, adjusting seasonings, sneaking in little touches like fresh flowers on every plate because she wanted it perfect. By the third day, the house smelled of roasted chicken, apple pie, and mashed potatoes, the kind of smell that makes you think of home, of safety, of love. I watched her work and felt pride, but also a pang of fear. What if no one came? What if all this effort was wasted? And then came my dad's message, short, cold, dismissive. "Have you ever poured your heart into something only to have someone else decide it doesn't matter?" I knew Richard wasn't trying to be cruel. He had always been rigid, focused on tradition, the cemetery visit, the formalities, the checklist of what one should do when someone dies. But he had completely overlooked what mattered most, honoring the memory of my mom in a way that felt alive, in a way that brought comfort and connection. So I didn't reply. I let Lily finish her work. I lit candles and arranged chairs. I waited. Hours passed. The house was silent, the smells of the food wrapping around me like a warm, quiet hug. And then, 15 hours later, it began. The front door started shaking. At first, I thought it was the wind, but no, this was deliberate. Someone was at the door. And when I looked through the peephole, I froze. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever watched someone pour their heart into something, only to feel like the world might not notice? That was Lily. 17, determined, exhausted, and fueled entirely by love for her grandmother. The first day, she wrote out a plan as if she were organizing a banquet for royalty, not just a wake. Every recipe measured, every dish considered. She even color-coded the flowers for each plate, making sure the table looked as warm and inviting as my mom's smile used to be. I remember glancing over her shoulder and thinking, she's going to wear herself out, but she won't stop. Day 2 was chaos and magic all at once. The kitchen was a war zone of pots, pans, and flour dust floating in the air like tiny memories. Lily burned her finger on the roasting pan and didn't even flinch. She just wrapped it in a towel and carried on. She hummed softly while stirring sauces, tasting constantly, adjusting flavors with an intuition that seemed beyond her years. I kept stealing glances, feeling a mix of pride and helplessness. This was more than cooking. This was grief transformed into something tangible, something alive, something that would let my mother's memory linger in the corners of our home. By the third day, the smell of food had seeped into every wall, every fabric, every surface of the house. Roasted chicken, buttery mashed potatoes, pies filled with apples my mom had picked herself. I helped arrange chairs, light candles, and fold napkins, but Lily did the heavy lifting. And all the while, I worried. What if my father convinced everyone else to skip the house? What if all of her effort, every tear, and every burned finger went unnoticed? Could grief truly be so cruel as to make someone invisible at the one moment that mattered most? And then it happened. Just an hour before guests were meant to arrive, my phone buzzed again. It was another text from Richard. The words were cold, clipped, like a blade sliding over my heart. "We'll just stop by the cemetery. The house gathering isn't necessary." I stared at the screen, the warmth of the kitchen suddenly feeling suffocating. What would you do if someone dismissed everything your child had worked for, everything you had planned? I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I just watched Lily finish setting the table. And then I waited, knowing deep down that what came next would change everything. And no one would see it coming. Have you ever felt the need to act without saying a word, letting silence do the talking for you? That was me that night. Richard had dismissed everything Lily had poured her heart into, and I could feel anger simmering beneath my grief. But I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I did something else. I let the house speak for itself. The lights were dimmed, candles flickering, plates arranged with precision. Every dish smelled like love, like memory, like a home that refused to forget. I moved quietly through the kitchen, checking details, adjusting napkins, straightening flowers, while Lily, exhausted but determined, hovered nearby. She didn't say a word about my father's text. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but also something stronger, a quiet pride, a resolve that no one, not even her grandfather, could take away. Hours passed. I wondered if Richard had already called the rest of the family to cancel. I could hear the wind outside, rattling the windows, and for a moment I felt the house itself was holding its breath. Every tick of the clock echoed like a heartbeat, reminding me that grief and patience can sometimes be the most powerful weapons. Have you ever waited, knowing that silence alone could make someone confront their mistakes? I even set up small surprises. Her grandmother's favorite flowers in every vase, a playlist of songs my mom loved softly humming in the background. It was like building a world where my mom's spirit could sit at the table and smile. And all the while, I imagined the moment Richard and the family would walk in. Would they see it? Would they understand? Then, as the night deepened and the hours stretched, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of someone outside. At first, I thought it was the wind, the branches tapping against the windows. But it wasn't. The front door started shaking violently, as if someone was trying to force their way in. My heart froze. Who would be here at this hour? Richard? The family? Or someone else entirely? And as I crept to the door, my mind raced with possibilities. But what awaited me outside wasn't anything I, or Lily, were prepared for. Who shows up at a house that's quiet, dark, and filled with the scent of love? And then starts shaking the door like a storm has arrived early? That was the moment I realized this wasn't the wind. Someone was angry. Someone was demanding attention. And yes, it was my father. Richard, furious, standing at the doorstep with half the extended family in tow, eyes wide, voices rising in confusion and frustration. I opened the door, trying to steady my shaking hands. Richard's face was red, his lips tight, and there was this look in his eyes. A mixture of disbelief and irritation, as if he couldn't comprehend that we hadn't followed his plan. "Emma," he barked, "why are we doing this? We'll honor Mom at the cemetery. This house gathering, this chaos, isn't necessary." His voice echoed through the empty front yard. I looked at him, calm but firm, and said the only thing I could: "You'll honor her by joining us here, where she would have wanted, where she would have felt loved." Silence fell for a moment. And then Lily appeared, emerging from the kitchen like a quiet storm. 17 years old, exhausted, but her eyes steady, unwavering. I could see the tension in Richard's jaw as he realized his dismissiveness hadn't intimidated her, not even close. The family was stunned. Some were whispering apologies. Others were trying to process why we hadn't called them, why we hadn't waited at the cemetery. And the irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had always demanded control, who had always dictated what should be done, now faced the consequences of underestimating a teenager's courage and love. Have you ever seen someone so used to being in charge suddenly lose all power in a single glance? That was Richard. Voices rose, then fell. Questions, accusations, confusion. But amidst it all, the warmth of the house pressed in, the smell of the food, the flickering candlelight, the tangible presence of my mother in every detail. It was undeniable. And just when it seemed the night couldn't get more intense, when the family stood frozen between anger and awe, something happened at the back door. something that none of us expected, and it changed the night completely. By the time the back door opened, I realized that everything I had feared, everything I had worried might fall apart, was about to turn in a way I couldn't have predicted. One by one, neighbors, distant relatives, and even a few of my father's friends quietly stepped inside. They had heard about the gathering from someone else, someone who knew what Lily had done, and they were drawn not by obligation, but by curiosity and by the undeniable pull of love and effort. The house, once silent and tense, was suddenly filled with voices, laughter, and tears. People wandered from the kitchen to the dining room, sampling dishes, commenting on flavors, sharing memories of my mother. Lily moved among them, tired but radiant, explaining recipes, offering slices of pie with a quiet confidence that made my heart swell. And Richard, he stood by the door, rigid, flushed with anger, and yet unable to interrupt the flow of life that had taken over our home. For the first time that night, he realized that control wasn't power. Love and effort were. And his dismissive text, the one that had cut so sharply, didn't matter. Not here, not now, not in the world Lily and I had created. I watched him, felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Pride for my daughter, yes, but also sadness for a man who had missed the point of honoring someone he loved. Sometimes, the people closest to us fail to see the truth until it hits them in full force. That night, the truth was impossible to ignore. A 17-year-old girl's love, patience, and determination had outshone decades of rigid expectations and cold dismissal. By the end of the evening, Richard quietly took a seat, reluctantly joining the gathering he had initially dismissed. Lily's dishes were devoured, stories were shared, and the warmth of my mother's memory filled every corner. I realized then that grief could divide, yes, but it could also bring clarity. It could reveal who truly values connection, effort, and heart. And in that house, on that night, we honored my mom in the only way that truly mattered together. So, I ask you, have you ever been overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued? Sometimes, silence and deliberate action speak louder than words. That night, we didn't argue. We didn't beg. We simply let love and effort speak for themselves. And in the end, they did more powerfully than anything my father could have imagined.